Prepare yourself for invasion. This is Indie Invasion.
The turning. Fagin halted abruptly and listened, head cocked to one side, the sounds of his footsteps echoing away through the dank, dreary corridor. He had begun to dread these visits to Nancy. Not only did he find her sinister presence unsettling, but he was appalled at what went on inside her subterranean chamber. Her alchemantic experiments were unnatural, disconcerting, and as much as Fagin enjoyed the newfound wealth the engine node and its changes had brought, at moments like these, he still wondered if he might not have been better off just entombing the thonic device underground, forever out of temptation's reach. Nancy, once delicate and kind-hearted, was now a source of great concern to Fagin. She seemed to be made of ice these days, her heart frozen against any notion of compassion. The engine node seemed to have twisted her into a cruel parody of her former tender self. Ever since the twisting, she had spent hours, days, weeks studying the enigmatic node. Just recently, she had discovered how its arcane power could be harnessed to create the Irken, and she delighted in the dreadful process. Before the twisting, Fagin had cared for his ragtag band of pickpocket boys in his way. They were surely expendable when arrested. It was their own fault and lack of skill if they got themselves caught. But he still wouldn't have wished this fate on even the worst of them. Nor would he have wished it on the many other lads, street urchins and merchant children alike, who Nancy had transmogrified into the vile little slaves they now knew as Irken. Still, since the attacks that had started of late, the number of Irken needed to be kept up, and they did make excellent robbers. It was hard to argue with such piles of loot. Eerie noises from Nancy's chamber suggested she was already at work. The faint hissing of steam lines and staccato bubbling of alchemical vials provided a chaotic counterpoint to the uncanny, deeply sibilant mechanical thrumming that indicated Nancy was harnessing some level of power from the node. Fagin paused with his hand on the door, summoning a modicum of confidence and self-possession to his tired facade. Taking a deep breath, he entered. As always, the chamber was rank with odors, both indescribable and grotesque, emanating from myriad steaming and bubbling flasks. The center of the room was dominated by a large surgical table, to which was strapped the weakly struggling form of a young street lad. Nancy stood over the prone form, gently stroking the boy's hair and whispering faint words that couldn't be heard clearly by Fagin. The wizened old pickpocket cleared his throat, and Nancy turned languidly. Her malevolent expression shifted into a slightly sardonic smile as she saw Fagin standing in the doorway. "Come to see the changing, have you, Fagin?" she inquired darkly. "Nance," Fagin began, the small amount of self-confidence he had summoned rapidly evaporating as he surveyed the macabre chamber. "Do you think this is right? I mean, returning these lads and all. Right? Nancy glowered dismissively. Are you still laboring under such delusions of morality? We need these Urkin. Have you not seen how their numbers diminished lately? We are under attack, Fagin, in case you haven't noticed. I have noticed, Nance, the old man continued persistently. But I still think we should sod off and leave 'em to it, like what we always done. Fagin wished that the old days would return. Somehow, even with all its complications, hardships, and frequent run-ins with the law, the past had seemed simpler, and it certainly felt better than the protean, dreamlike world in which they now found themselves. I have had enough of running and hiding, Nancy hissed fiercely. The engine has granted me a new perspective. My eyes have been opened. My true self awakens, and I see now that I no longer need to run and hide. But enough. There is, at present, work to be done. Nancy turned back to the table, dipping her sensual finger into a vial of inky black fluid, drew a small rune on the child's clammy forehead. Your time has come, young one, she murmured softly. Time to unlock that which sleeps within, that which has been ordained. With that, she stepped back a pace and flipped open her notebook. Her voice became a monotonous drone as she read from the occult pages. Fagin moved to the side to allow himself a clear view of the proceedings. As much as he loathed this process, he found it strangely fascinating and hypnotic. The lad, strapped firmly to the steel bench, struggled feebly against his bonds in a last, desperate effort to get free, as he sensed the impending procedure. There was a rising, whirring noise, a white noise that hinted at 1,000 voices, a noise that sent shudders through Fagin and seemed to resonate within the very stone of the walls. From beneath the table, a series of mechanical clockwork arms emerged, each tipped with ominously hooked blades and glinting syringes filled with various bubbling substances. A cry of terror died on the boy's lips. Then he sagged, and the arms began their grisly work. With a speed unnatural and unnerving, the arms moved like a spider over its prey, injecting and slicing at the now limp form. To have the power to mold and remodel. Intoxicating, isn't it, Fagin? Nancy said effusively, leaning in close to carefully study the procedure with a delight that could only be described as both psychopathic and despicable. Once the gruesome operation was complete and the spidery arms had retracted, what remained was no longer a boy, but a cruel parody of the former self. Eyes had been replaced with a series of lenses. Cogs and gears whirred somewhere deep inside, and limbs had taken on a slightly unsettling lack of proportion. It was an Urkin. Nancy smirked and loosened the straps. Another success. More grist for your mill, Fagin, she simpered. Another soul to be ground to dust in exchange for more time. Nancy turned to face the aged thief. And we need more time. We cannot afford any more interruptions. I have nearly broken the third code, she continued triumphantly. Soon, I will be in control, and the power of this node will be mine to do with as I will. Fagin suppressed a grimace. He wasn't entirely sure this was something he wanted. He knew it wouldn't be good for him once Nancy had command of such power. It wouldn't be good for anyone. Suddenly, the newly created Urkin leapt from the bench, hissing, and took up a long, glinting surgical knife to slash at Nancy's back. With an almost effortless movement, Nancy swept clear of the blow. Her hand rose, palm outwards, and the Urkin was blasted squarely in the chest by a spectral orb of inky blackness. He was lifted clear off his feet, slamming into the far wall in a shower of broken glass and spraying liquid, writhing as his body dissolved into ash, a charred skeleton falling to the floor. "I thought you knew what you was doing, Nance," Fagin offered smugly. "I did," she replied darkly, turning back to Fagin with a bitter gaze. "He didn't." Fagin felt a sudden chill to his core. He decided he had some other place he needed to be. Somewhere. Anywhere that wasn't here.
Thanks, guys, for listening to today's tales. You can find our Indie Invasion podcast on all podcast platforms, including Podbean, Google, and iTunes. And please visit us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and if you can, support us on Patreon/Indie Invasion. And feel free to email us with any questions or comments at indieinvasion@gmail.com. And remember, guys, don't forget to prepare yourself for the invasion.